All right, I'd like to call the regular Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Kelly.
Ms. Betterman?
Here.
Mr. Case-Layout?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Excused.
Mr. Rakowski?
Here.
Ms. Stadler?
Delayed.
Mr. Singh? Can you hear us?
Anthony.
We can't hear
Anthony.
him. He's saying something.
He's here.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Anthony?
Now I'm saying
Anthony.
He says he can hear.
We can't. How come we can't?
Here.
Oh, there you go.
Aloha.
All right, he's in here.
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
Ms. Hewer?
Yeah,
Here. Mr. White?
Here.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Fire up.
Yeah.
Exits are at the back in the LGA.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right, so tonight's workshop is a discussion about board goals. So I know we had the board goals from last year, and Matt did send us some, I won't say goals to starting points. I don't know if you guys want to start with what Matt has sent us and then build off of that, or if we want to start with fresh ideas ourselves. I'm open to.
I like the three that Matt proposed. I may have a fourth, but I think they were a good start to. It includes a lot of the things that we had in our prior goals, and maybe can bring it down to a more narrow view now. To me, one comment is to me that they're more like vision statements rather than goals, right? Because the goals we want to be the SMART goals, like we heard, the measurable and all that, where these are bigger statements, and then we maybe have to have the three or so measurable goals underneath them. So that was a comment I had.
Or what I was thinking is if that was a goal, that then we would come up with how we're going to measure it. For instance, like the excellence goal that Matt wrote, I said, how can we measure that piece? We could say, well, we can measure it by graduation rate as a whole, as well as the subgroups. We could look at the subgroups to see if they're continuously increasing, as well as looking at discipline referrals and extracurricular participation. So I was looking at how we can measure the excellence to make sure that we're taking responsibility for the success of every student. I changed the word each to every student. But
Hear me now?
it's pretty, I think you need to turn down your volume, Ant. It's coming off loud and distorted. Or coming across. It's like it's freezing on him.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any, I never see his mouth move, so I think there's a bad delay.
See, it's like it's jumping out.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if we could keep that as the statement and then as a board determine how we want to measure it. So then we could let Matt know what we're expecting to see to have for the growth.
So you're saying to refine the statements, or come, at this level, come to agreement on the statements, and then we can then take it the next step lower, what does maximize potential really mean, or can we measure how that is. It may be different
Yeah,
per person.
We had talked about, you know, that the goal can have strategies that aren't necessarily, you know, listed where our board goals are listed, but I think within that you're looking for places to measure whether or not we're making any progress. toward the goal.
Right.
So I like that the goal is broad enough, but yet I think we need to come up with what we want to see to measure it on.
But if this first discussion would be more about the broad, in the broad sense,
I
or
think-
changes to whatever in order, and then we can, in the later discussion, we would go into the more details. Is that what you're thinking?
I was thinking if we wanted to go goals and then see how we wanted to measure it, or if, like you said, there was a fourth goal, I think I know what it is because I had it too, like a fiscal goal.
No, it's actually not.
Oh. Well, mine was the fourth one was the fiscal goal.
Mine was more about the, what was my fourth one? It's something with restorative justice, behavioral type things, you know, whether, you know, things that we know lead to success, you know, absenteeism. What are some things in those realms we can chart a change from whether it's disciplinary actions into more of the restorative justice realm, you know, that we've had some issues in those areas.
I think though that is included in the equity goal. I mean, I definitely think that we want to delineate it, how we want to get there. But the idea of, you know, success for everyone and people's, you know, demographics not being predictors of their success, then you
Yeah, I can see it fit under there. That's a good idea.
We talked about, in one of the diversity meetings last year, Brian Soldish came in, Ashina Bayaz, that was it. But we talked about what were some of the barriers for kids to participate, just to participate, not even talking about the success, but I think
Right.
participation is a barrier to success. So
Sure.
absenteeism,
Right.
you know, I mean, I'm always talking about high school starting later, but also, you know, late bus. How late does the late bus go? Are kids not participating in sports or extracurricular activities because of that? We've only touched on tracking, but, you know, at what point has this student had all doors to taking honors classes closed to them? Is that okay? What does that look like? Obviously, there's the discipline issues.
Right.
So I think all of those they're very specific and they're very important, but I don't know, so I think that we should record them, but I don't know that they fit within the, you know, higher goal.
I think you're looking at levels here, right? The discussion seems to be talking about goals, and the other term is objectives, a more specific, definable thing that we can put our hands on or our teeth into, and that becomes measurable or achievable, at least reportable. So maybe what we're looking at is an outline for goals, and then point, some objectives underneath of it. I can see that being very useful, because when you talk about the things that you mentioned, those sound like things that should be decided, in my opinion, and then there might be more specific subsets below that aren't really in this mix, but that are going to be the work of the administration going forward.
I mean, to follow up on that, I wonder if there's space for a goal that's somewhere between something like wellness, but maybe is addressing like an emotional environment, like a nurturing emotional environment, which I feel like restorative justice falls into that. I think certainly restorative justice speaks to some of our equity issues, because discipline is an area where that certainly is an issue. But honestly, I think restorative justice benefits all of our students, just in terms of having a more like.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's important to remember that any improvement in the atmosphere in our district is not going to just benefit, you know, the students that it's directed to. It's going to benefit all students, which is why I like the broadness of these goals, because I think there's something about, you know, pointing your finger too closely at something rather than thinking about, you know, the overall environment that you're creating and then fine tuning from there. So I mean, I think wellness obviously is a huge goal, and you know, important to add. I don't know if, do you see a way to add it into the equity goal, or do you see it as a separate?
I would say, I mean, I could see it as its own goal personally. I mean, even when you were listing, you know, some of the things we talked about, like start time, that falls under, in my mind, a wellness. That could arguably affect, be an equity issue as well. But, you know, when you start thinking of like objectives, where you would put them underneath the different categories, I can think of several meaningful objectives that would fall under a wellness category in general. It's just a thought.
We did talk with Jonathan, presented here, about, you know, looking at what are outcomes, right? What are the outcomes we want? And that to me is really, we're talking about the excellence and what does success look like, and what are the things that could go to offerings or many, many, many different things, because we have many different students here. So, you know, I would like to have that input from that study fed into here as well. Timing's not so great because we want to do this now, and that's not going to be until the beginning of the year. But
I think we think about the goals as a sort of a living document. I don't know. I thought Matt did an excellent job with the goals last year in making a poster and sort of working the goals into conversations with administrators and teachers. So I think, the question is, do we want to have something to work with now, understanding that we'll revisit it, probably not in print in that way until, you know, next year, but what do you?
No, I agree.
I see what you mean. I think the strategic plan is going to really inform us about a lot, and so.
Right, because when we look at, you know, what do we mean when we talk about, you know, success for, you know, success for each student. So I think that the details and the bullets under there, we'll probably rough them out now, but they'll be refined over time. So I do agree with maybe restorative justice in the equity realm. You know, we can maybe broaden that into, you know, from equity, broaden it a little bit, but capture those types of aspects in there.
Can we just come up with a different word besides restorative justice, because that's a program, so maybe mindfulness? Because restorative justice is a specific program. That's a program that has specific regimens. So I think, but if you want to take that theory, and if I'm understanding that correctly?
Right, because there's a strict definition of what it is, and then if you go into, there's papers about what does that mean in schools, and it's not, you know, quite exactly like the strict definition is. So whatever the right, how to view it correctly, but somehow to transform maybe or revisit how we are carrying, you know, doing, you know, discipline or carrying through, make it a bigger process, is whatever that wording is, it should go into that block.
So I don't know if you read, there was an interesting article about restorative justice in the last NISPA newspaper, and it was very interesting to me. I don't remember all the details, but one thing that they repeated over and over and over again is that you can't just say, we're going to do a restorative justice program.
Right.
There are many, many steps to get to a place where people are able to embrace it in a really authentic way and make, you know, real and lasting change in the way discipline works in the district. And the term that they used about what they were developing sort of in advance of working on this restorative justice idea was a culture of care. And I thought that was really interesting because I feel like that is kind of this all-encompassing idea that isn't specific to students that are, you know, in the disciplinary realm, but more just applying to everyone. And so I felt like that does, in some ways, I think, work within the idea of these broader goals. I feel like restorative justice is just like trying to thread a needle that we can't do within our board goals. Like maybe that does become, I think, what Craig was saying, you know, about an objective is to. We did have our code of conduct looked at, and you know there is a lot of work to do there for sure. But I think if we back up a little bit about why we would even do that, that's maybe more within the realm of the goal making.
Could that be a goal? Culture of care? Maintaining a culture of care?
Yeah.
Would you consider that as part of the equity block.
I would put it as its own again. I really appreciate the equity as it's written. It's very specific. It's
very
contained.
clear.
I think it's
Yeah.
very clear. I worry that broadening it too much, it actually loses its impact. Where I feel like a commitment to maintaining a culture of care, a safe emotional environment, these kind of things are nurturing and conducive towards good learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point, because I go right to, okay, how am I going to measure, right? So I like when I was reading about the restorative justice, if we can probably get data, say we're going to do something different instead of just doing this, we're going to do this, and have more of a programmatic type of thing. But the culture of care is probably a better way to describe it, and then we can still get down to the how, so we can do a metric and make sure that and so we can show if we're progressing on it or not.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that could be worded into the excellence piece. I'm just looking at the language. You could say school district will foster and affirming and supportive culture where all students maximize their potential, or we as a community.
I mean, could it just be as affirming and supportive culture of care where all students, and the only reason I'm trying to build into what we have is because I feel like, I don't know if you've heard, but like people say, like if there are more than 3 light switches on a panel, you won't be able to remember which one does what. And so somehow keeping it within, you're working on your house right now, so do that. Throw away that 5 switch panel you just bought at Home Depot. Or just get a clapper. But I think that somehow keeping it, because this is also something we want people to walk around with, and I really watched Matt do that with our last goals, and I felt like it was a real tool. And I'm not saying we have to keep it to 3, but that's why I'm trying to see if it works.
Mm-hmm.
I think the excellence one is the most, that's, Mike, I think you said it's almost more like a vision statement or something. And so I know there's going to be some mission vision stuff that will come out of the strategic planning work. And so maybe instead of that excellence one, which again is sort of like this little nebulous, maybe that if you want to stick to 3, it's replaced by this culture of care, because the equity goal is about all students. It's not just about some.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Communication is about everyone. Right. So if you wanted to sort of totally redo the excellence one, well, I do love the idea of 3 or 4, just because it's like if I am using them as talking points, which I'd like to do, and again, this is maybe just a small thing, but like it seemed like the less you have, the easier that message is to deliver. And when you're sort of checking off goal after goal after goal with a group, it starts to...
Well, I like the excellence one because I think it'll feed right from Jonathan's piece where we're going to say, what do we want our students to leave with, right? That's, to me, so curriculum, skills, talents to leave with, and that'll fit under the, within the excellence. The equity, making sure that our culture within, whatever word we want to use, that it's fair, balanced, comfortable, inclusive, that notion, and then communication obviously within, around, and with all our stakeholders are important, and then we could add financial, but then we would have the 3 kind of big, to me, major blocks kind of covered by these 3, and maybe we just need to tweak the wording.
Yeah, I mean, I see benefits to both, because I feel like the excellence goal is I like the way it's worded now. You could throw in care, but it's not really going there with what care is, what care looks like. And so, and if we did a care, it would be EECC, which would be very balanced. So, I don't know, I would be totally willing to, do you want to quickly try to wordsmith something, or do you want to think about it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We have time. No pressure.
Okay, James.
So we're talking about writing a 4th?
Yes.
Let's think about it. Yeah, I mean, I do really agree that it's something that could go a long way.
I don't have a problem with 4 or 5. I think my limit is 6. I'm getting leery, but 3, I don't know if we really cover it. You start to combine things, and it begins to look a little artificial if you try to squeeze the 2 goals into 1.
I've just spent the last 10 minutes looking at board goals of other districts, and I didn't see one that had only 3.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some that had like 10, which is too many.
Too many.
I think 5. I feel like 5 is a
Well, let's
the
see how many
max.
we feel we need. I mean, I do think that there's room for the care one, for sure. We did have a fiscal one last year.
And, you know, thinking about it, listening to Anthony, you know, you should keep that in mind as well, always, so that could be one as well. So we would be at 5.
I mean, I put fiscal just, but I was thinking I was thinking of curricular as well, and the social emotional piece. So like my fiscal that I wordsmithed was Beacon City School District will maximize funds to enhance all programs to provide a learning experience that is meaningful to every student. For instance, how do you track that? You could track that through new programs purchased to enhance instruction, life experiences such as field trips, curriculum offerings, extracurricular offerings, and building improvements. So like I tried to say, all right, well, yeah, we want to be fiscally responsive, but we also want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of every student. So when I was wordsmithing, I tried to tie into how that fiscal responsiveness would ensure that we're providing that excellence and equity along with the communication piece.
I'd like to add, at the present time, I'm not part of this constituency that I'm going to address, but that is the non-parent taxpayer. There's a lot of those, including all the commercial taxpayers, a lot of the senior citizens and retirees, and a lot of people who just haven't gone into the parent business, or their kids are in private schools or elsewhere. But they're an important constituency to us. A, they do pay their taxes, and B, they vote. So it's important that we keep that in mind. I've been thinking that maybe our fiscal goal should have a lot more to do with building public support for investment in public education. And I don't have a text to offer beyond just that phrase, but that's something to be considered.
And I saw a lot of what you were speaking about, Anthony, fitting into the excellence, where, you know, if we look at the outcomes that we want, different students with different interests, you know, some maybe they want to go into trades or college or military or all the various other things. We would say, hey, here's the 5 or so major roadways that we see kids fitting into, not to force them, but here's the program that we would need to develop, or here's the gaps to really at what excellence is in each of these paths, and lay out a plan of how we can get those programs involved. What do they need? What do they need? They need facilities. They need curriculum. They need teachers. So how are we going to get them there? So it's kind of you put all that into the fiscal goal. You know, I had a lot of that in the excellence goal, because you need to say what does excellence look like, and then in the financial side, we're focusing on how are we going to maximize the taxpayer dollar to support all kids, and that will feed into the plan that we put together. So just slightly different way of I think I see what you were saying. I just had it split a little differently.
No, absolutely.
So I just emailed everyone a rough draft of CARE. I'm going to read it to you if you'd like to. Say, the BCSD will foster a culture of care dedicated to maintaining a safe and supportive emotional environment and the wellness of every student.
Can you say it again?
Sure. CARE. The BCSD will foster a culture of care dedicated to maintaining a safe and supportive emotional environment and the wellness of every student.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's simple.
Yeah, it's simple, and really, I think it says what we're thinking, right?
Yeah.
That's what you envision. You can build into the details from there.
We don't have to capitalize culture of care. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of an issue with that.
I didn't mean to do that. Actually. I title everything. Let's see.
No, I just emailed you all these goals so you can see them. All right, sorry about that.
Anthony, do you have anything that you want to chime in on?
Still not
Is he
done.
here?
He was just there.
Looks like it's frozen.
Might take a minute for him to hear that.
Or is he just being still?
It's frozen.
Let's see him back
This is working really well.
Students are good at things of how other things.
Yep.
That's this fiscal.
Okay.
The way it's worded.
Hi, Flora.
It kind of covers it.
I know you got here a little late, but I want to know, do you have anything that you want to add? We were reviewing the goals that Matt sent, and then
Yeah.
we were trying to build off of and seeing where the gaps were, and coming up with one or two others.
Okay, I did have a question about the equity goal. And this may be a little too granular, but the idea that, and we may have already discussed this, but the idea that we're working to eliminate race, class, gender, ethnicity, and disability as predictors of student success, should it be something more like the presumption that these things are predictors of student success? I mean, I guess my question is, in what way are they being used as predictors? Are we talking about biases that are built into the system, biases that are built into behaviors, or?
I was thinking probably more as like almost like national predictors. Not, I mean, they certainly could be predictors in Beacon, but it's something that's kind of a nationwide issue.
With the data.
Oh, the way, you mean because of the way that the data is presented?
Well, I think if, the way I interpreted it, and this is only speaking from my interpretation, was whenever you're looking at this school report card, they always have the subcategories, the
Right.
identified categories.
Right.
And then you always see how a subcategory is not performing as well as the, what they say, the general norm. So I think when you're eliminating that you're eliminating the barriers to have everyone be that general norm and meet that same standard.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is bring everybody up to the same level, not.
That's how I interpreted it.
Okay, I was a little confused on that point. It could just be me.
I
I'm
think
seeing-
that's kind of how I interpreted it as well, is that because we see these KPIs, key performance indicators, if we kind of ignore those things, right, like the statistics about graduation rates for certain segments of students, rather than focusing on each individual one, but look at everybody as a whole. Am I right? Is that?
That's, yeah.
And I don't know, you know, I'm not in the education business, so I don't know if they are actually barriers, but we want to make sure that they are not barriers, right?
Right.
They are not barriers here.
Like it's almost saying like if you're a student with disability that you're gonna have a 50% chance of graduating. Why is that the case?
Right.
Or if you're an African American, you only have 1 out of every 2 graduate, right? Instead
Right.
of where the school graduation rate is 86%. Why is it 50% for, so eliminate those barriers so everyone's 86%?
You could word it with the word barrier.
That's what I was wondering, if we could make it a little more positive rather than a negation.
Barriers or impediments, something like that.
Barriers to student success.
I also realized that some places use student opportunity and success. They say the word opportunity in there just because it sort of speaks to kids participating in extracurriculars, kids participating in higher level classes. It speaks to, I guess it's implied that opportunity is a key to success, but the word opportunity could be worked into. But how would it be worded if we used barrier instead of? It would just say we would work to eliminate those things as barriers.
Barriers to student success. Does that work as well?
I don't know, because then it sounds.
Implies that they are.
That they're currently barriers.
Yeah.
Right, I
I
actually
mean,
liked
but
predictors.
real talk.
Say that again.
Real talk, if you look at the numbers, objectively, they are barriers, are they not? I mean,
Gender's
Well,
not.
our last goal, didn't it have barriers in it, last year's?
I like the word predictors just because I think it's something that if we could predict something, why not address the predictor? The barriers, I think you're addressing something different.
I liked predictors. We did last year, we said identifying and addressing the barriers that prevent students from completely experiencing all that the district has to offer. Which is obviously just long.
I'd also weigh in, I like predictors because it points to data, which we can look at.
Yeah.
Where if we say barriers, we could spitball what we think all the barriers are, but that kind of opens up a much more nebulous
yeah, I
territory.
agree.
Right. I hear you.
Okay.
But I get the need to maybe be clear, use the word data in there somewhere, I'm not sure, but.
I don't want to put data in our goals. But, I mean, it's
implied.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though. The word predictors does tie to data without even saying it. I agree with that.
Because that is data, class, gender, ethnicity.
Right.
Just, those are categories of data. So.
Right.
Right.
Anthony,
Yeah, I'm back.
did you have anything that you want to add?
What I was gonna say is I can't articulate very well what I would suggest, and I think the level of detail that I would want wouldn't be appropriate for the goals. But I do feel that as long as whatever language is in the goals will promote the work, not just to meeting targets, but to exceeding targets. If you remember before one of the presentations from, I think it was PPS, they mentioned 3 years to get into compliance. I asked for 5 years to exceed compliance. I think I would like these goals to foster a vision beyond just doing the minimum. So however that's worded, I'm flexible in the wording as long as the work is done that way.
All right, and I think that some of the verbiage that are in these doesn't go to the minimum.
It says maximize in the first goal.
All right, thank you. So do you guys want to, so what I had down as I was taking little notes here was that we agree that there needs to be an excellence goal, an equity goal, communication goal, and care goal. Am I on
Yes,
target with that?
I agree with that. Okay.
Okay, so then, was there
Let me
anything
ask,
else?
if I can ask something. So with those 4 goals, would something like, for example, preparing students for vocational training, would that fit in the goal?
It would fit under excellence to me because it's really, really looking at success of every student, and we'll see, there's different students want different things, and we want to make sure that we equip them properly for what they want to get out of life.
So I think that would fit under like a strategy or objective to the
Right.
goal. Yes.
The way that we're going to measure it.
Right, how we're going to measure it, how are we going to, build what that looks like, whatever different pathways, and how we're going to get there.
How we measure it, right?
Right.
So yes, Anthony.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I would propose the fifth, some kind of financial statement for, making sure we're efficient, responsible with the taxpayer money to promote all the work that we want at the school,
I agree with that. I've just been looking at, a dozen or so other district goals, board goals, and every one of them has some fiscal goal. Not saying that we need to compare to what everybody else is doing, but I think it gives some perspective that's
And
valuable.
it's one of my 4 I grew up doing up, so I'm in agreement.
It might be helpful
That wording's
to
good.
write all these
It's
down
the
as
first half of
a
it anyway.
shopping list, and then we can look at them in writing again. I think you've done
I've
some
been
good
writing.
drafting,
I've been writing them as we're
Find
going.
challenges.
Good.
You know, what,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so let me ask the question, how does the goal support celebrating diversity? The goals, to me, doesn't fit, doesn't say anything about celebrating diversity, but if you can point that out, we appreciate that.
So I think the category that you're looking for falls underneath like a couple of the goals that we've been discussing. So it might go underneath the celebration, might be underneath the communication, right? Because you communicate success and celebrate through communication. So it could go under that way, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I might add, I think it's a good point Anthony brings up. I don't know, I don't want to read his mind, but I go to curriculum in that, where, we think about, this is something we're doing as a district, is we're looking at how can we, instead of having Black History Month, have Black History Year. Instead of having Hispanic Heritage Month, how do we have that woven throughout the year? So, in that regards, I don't know, we could think of it as fitting under excellence as an academic goal. We could think of it under care in terms of just a celebration. I also wouldn't be opposed to inserting something along those lines in equity goals as well. I don't know, I'm open. I kind of see that. I think it's a good point.
All right, I don't want to get off track though. So we're
Yeah.
talking about fiscal
Sorry.
and coming up, and then we could go back and kind of wordsmith each one, and then come up with how we're going to measure each one. So we don't have anything wordsmith yet to get.
I can offer an example, if you'd like. I can read from, this is from the Pauling School District. If no one objects, I'll read their fiscal goal. I think it's worded nicely. Continue to employ an efficient and transparent process to develop a fiscally responsible budget for the near and long term, given the economic constraints and conditions mandated by the tax levy cap, while maximizing efficiencies, promoting innovation, and maintaining or enhancing the integrity of programs and services at all the Pauling Central School District schools. Maybe we could use that as a springboard for us. I think it covers.
Do you mind copying and pasting that?
Yeah.
Can I just ask, what do we see what a fiscal goal would do that's not already in our board mandate?
That's a good point. I think that what Craig said is not news. It is part of our role as board members, but it is true that it's just creating support for the budget and for the district.
We kind of dealt with that the first time around when we wound up focusing it upon the last phrase of the existing goal that we had, where it ties back to trying to improve the offerings for the students. I think that brings it back full circle. Then the other part of it is, I think that building support for investment in public education. The appropriate phraseology. I think that the Pauling one's a bit wordy, and I'm not fond of making obeisances to that tax cap either.
Right. I think some of it can be shortened, but I think having it as a goal, especially for our taxpayers, I think it's important that we have it as one of our top 5, because we go and we develop budgets, and there is a tax cap, and the taxes goes up a little bit every year. So I think people want to know that we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about the taxpayers. So
So even though it's part of our mandate as board members, I think it's important to have it as a separate goal.
I think so.
Yeah,
think
no,
so.
it makes
I
sense.
think it needs to be in the forefront of every decision we make. So having it as a goal kind of reminds you. Whereas here, we know it's our responsibility as a board, but having it in language kind of
Right.
to go back to when it's that tough decision.
Right, because we may come up with all these programs we want for excellence, and we're just going to go and put them all in next year. Well, that can't work, because fiscally, we're going to lay out the most efficient plan to roll it in over time. So,
But does that? I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, because I'm trying to think of fiscal responsibility as a goal in itself. It's not making sense to me. Maybe I'm just not getting it. Maybe it's because I'm in the middle of online board training, fiscal, where we're getting all of that. In my mind, that seems to be a fiscal responsibility is in all of our playbook of how we operate, right? That's like what we do
Well,
anyway. So
you
as a
could
goal
make
in
the
itself.
argument that all of this is sort of within the playbook, but it's
Yeah.
just saying what are we, from all of our responsibilities, what's rising to the top as like the main categories.
I guess what I'm trying to wonder is, what does the goal? Each of our goals give us space to branch out of, right? We can imagine how each of these goals, there's places to move forward in a direction. The fiscal responsibility one doesn't actually give us any space. It actually just points at the other goals. It's saying it's sort of like, wow, you do the other goals, don't forget about this one. So it doesn't make sense to me.
It's a little bit circular in that sense,
Yeah.
but I do feel like Matt said last year during budget season, that your budget reflects your values. And so I do think it's important to have it on the list, I
Right.
think. It makes sense to me. And I think actually of the goal that Alyssa just sent, just the first part, it does get really long, and I don't want to mention the tax cap within it, but just continuing to employ an efficient and transparent process to develop a fiscally responsible budget for the near and long term. And the near and long term is, I really like that, because I
Right.
feel like we need to be thinking about, not just this year, but what are we trying to build and grow.
right, and then get rid of, given the economic constraints and conditions
Yeah.
mandated by a tax-levy cap, possibly keeping while maximizing efficiency, but may even just end after long term, because
That's what I was just trying to say. I had the Beacon City School District will continue to employ a transparent budget process while maximizing district programs and offerings in the near and long term.
I like that, and you don't want it to be, 4 lines longer than the other goals.
Mhm.
And that sort of thing.
I mean, I'm just trying to take what you guys are
Right.
saying and condense it into something, so if you guys don't agree with it, I'll send this out to you, and we're gonna do another workshop, but I was just trying to get out there what I'm doing behind the computer, so you guys know that I'm just trying to take pieces of what I'm hearing feedback and generate it, so you guys will be able to comment on it, but I thought to have something in front of you to work on, to give us that piece, so. Noah, do you have any input that you wanna share? I know if Kristen was here, she'd yell at me for putting me on the spot, but I think it's important that we reach out to get your input as well.
I was just reading over the current board goals, but the one that I like the most, I think, I was reading Dr. Lando's email, is the communication goal, because I know even like the students' communications, the students may not realize that they like it, but they like knowing what's going on. So I think that's an important part of what the board does, not as like Annie and I try to communicate the best, but if they know that's what we're trying to do, that will really help them at least build the trust between board and administration, and so they can have that conversation.
Thank you. All right, so what I'll do is I'm gonna take the notes from today. I'll share it as a Google Doc, so you guys could just have at it, and then when we meet again, we could wordsmith it. You'll see underneath each one, so the ones that I have on here from our conversation is excellence, and then underneath I put measured by, so you can add how you want to measure it by, and then I have equity, and then I have measured by fiscal, measured by communication, measured by, and care, measured by.
Okay.
Then you guys could start, if you want to wordsmith it, you could wordsmith it, and then when we come back together at the next board meeting, we could talk about, hey, what do we need to finalize this, and hopefully adopt it at the end of the meeting.
So on the Google Doc, we can add in our thoughts, either wordsmithing or some of those sub-bullets.
Yeah, if you're not, if you're gonna like say, if you have like something specific, like if it was to enhance reading pieces and you're wondering how that is, I would say like, let's try and keep the first page as the goals and how it's measured by, and then if you have comments that you want to share, put it on like a second page of the document, so we have a, like if you have comments, almost like comments, but you don't want to edit the goal, but you want to put comments as to, I'd like to change predictors to barriers, right?
Oh, okay.
In goal, this, I'd like to change predictors to barriers, but I think keeping that as to, hey, this is what we're working off of, so everyone sees that, and then you put your comments underneath, so someone's not changing it, and then someone could be commenting on something that was already changed.
Do you know how to do, in Google Docs, you can do
Track change.
we do track change, you also do comments on the side,
Mhm.
so you can just highlight.
Yeah, so if you want to do comments on this, I'm fine with however you want to do it.
Right.
Whatever people's
Don't change.
technology
Yeah.
comfortable, whatever they're comfortable with technology wise.
Can we, my team and I, can we put ideas for measurables?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
And so I just have to adjust because I already came in with like measurables, and I don't want that to influence, so I'll put that on the second sheet so it's not there. So we'll just say measure by, and then mine will be on the second sheet or a comment section as to how I feel I can measure it. Just all right. Anything else for the workshop?
I just, so you know, I just sent along one last example wording for communications goal as well, just because I liked the way it read. So, not that we've discussed it, but it's there.
All right. All right, Anthony, we finished a little bit early, but we're gonna, at 7:30, we're gonna be adjourning to executive session. We'll take you in on the computer. All right. All right, so we do have 10 minutes if you can go. I'll review the consent agenda with some addendums when we get to the consent part prior to. Do we have any student or school presentations? Any parent groups? Anybody for open to the public? Seeing none, superintendent's report.
Just have two things that I want to talk about. One was we had a fantastic homecoming night. It started with I was able to attend every aspect of the evening, and it was just great all around. Had an amazing pep rally, the high school in the afternoon, then we had the tailgating outside, which a lot of the high school students attended. After that, we had the soccer game behind the high school. We had the football game under the lights for the first time at the stadium. Really great turnout to both of those games. And then we had the homecoming dance, which we haven't had in a few years. And that was very well attended. I think 400 to 500 students showed up for that. And so just all around, I want to thank all the people that made it happen, high school administration, John Giametta, coaches, all the teachers, chaperones. And it's just a fantastic evening, and hopefully it started a new tradition. Second thing I just want to update folks on is our first meeting for the strategic planning committee is happening on Tuesday, October 23rd in the afternoon into the evening from 4 to 7. We have community members identified. I'll share all the members of the committee at the Monday, October 22nd meeting, but we have our community members identified. We're getting close to identifying our staff members. Anthony and Meredith, I think both of you are going to be the board members on the committee. So the committee's coming together, and we can't wait for that work to get started. And the kickoff meeting will be on October 23rd, and that is all I have. Mr. White?
All right. Committee reports, including board comments? No?
So for Spirit Week, like Dr. Long said, it was a great turnout, a lot of great week. We had a lot of students participate. At the next board meeting, we are hoping to have a quick slideshow for you guys with coordination with Ms. Soto and all of the class presidents. We'll come down and hopefully talk about their experience and what they thought about everything. Hopefully we'll have that at the next board meeting. At the high school, we had a blood drive on October 2nd. Coming up, October 26th, the National Honor Society is having a costume volleyball tournament. And also on November 9th, they're having a Incredibles 2 movie night showing. For college, October 4th, the high school had how to get the most out of a college fair during lunches. I don't have lunch, but I did come down during a study hall, and it was a very informative session, well put on by the guidance department on what to look for and what to ask of college admissions officials at different college fairs. October 4th, there were also 2 events held at night. One was financial aid night, which was given by a DCC financial aid officer, which was helpful, and FAFSA opened October 1st. So that was good to get a sense of how that all works. And also Mr. Giametta put on a college athletic recruitment information session, which was supposed to happen last year, but it got canceled. But I heard it was very well from everyone who went. It gave a sense of what to look for, not just the athletic part, but what part you're looking for in the college. This Saturday, the high school is having the PSAT, and starting this week, Annie and I are meeting with the class presidents to talk about what they would like to see brought to future board meetings from Annie and I. So,
great. Thank you. Craig?
Sure. Attended part of the homecoming, specifically the football game, at least the beginning of it. I understand the ending was pretty exciting in overtime. But I did notice that we had some construction type lights that were rented for the purpose of lighting up the field at night, which is interesting to see what it looks like to have a night game in the Beacon School District. And I thought it was very nice, although of course people should recognize that those lights operate at a lower level of height than the ones that we would want eventually to own and install. Probably not going to do that this time around, but sometime in the future. It does give you a bit of a hint at how nice it is to be able to have a night game. I thought it was great. We had our first meeting of the Public Relations Advocacy and Legislative Committee, and plan to do that monthly, looking at the fourth Wednesdays. We obviously, the name of the committee describes the 3 large areas of functioning. Under public relations, our first look is probably to dig into the website further to see what kind of improvements we may be able to make there. There have been some. We'd like to meet with Mr. Keeley and get a better understanding of what the potentials may be, or the pathways may be. Advocacy. We discussed a number of possible areas for that to occur and some of the mechanics, and we'll be digging into the details as we go. And on the legislative, I subsequently did connect with the New York State School Boards Association person who coordinates those kind of activities. She wanted to know if I would be the person to be the designated receiver of initiatives and so on as the chair of that committee, and I said I'll be happy to do that. So we're getting connected in this circuit.
Great, thank you. Laura?
Yeah, so I was also at the football game, and I have to say, to be honest, I've never gotten excited about football in my life, and I was standing up and screaming, and I was really into it, and it makes such a difference when you know the kids out there on the field are your kids, and that's your community, and it was a really cool experience, and probably the first live, school football game I've ever been to. So it was a good first experience for an art school student. So we had our first diversity committee meeting, and I'll let Anthony speak to that in a little more detail, but I thought the discussion was good in that we talked about working on ongoing things like the equity report card and sort of more the long-term stuff, but also communicating to the community and how we could do a better job of communicating to the community things that have been accomplished so far, and also maybe start looking at, I think the term that we had used was low-hanging fruit, maybe some things in the equity realm that we could do a little sooner rather than later. So I felt like the discussion was pretty productive, and I think we're off to a good start. We also, the Wellness Committee also met on September 26th. It was kind of a small group, but it sort of went toward our point that we really want to celebrate and emphasize the policy that we have implemented over the summer, the new wellness policy. We want to sort of get a sense of how the schools are implementing it in each building, and maybe look at providing a bit of a framework to bring the wellness policy to life. So we talked about that. We also talked about the Rombout Farm to School program, which was really cool. They're doing sort of tastings to get control over their choices, to feel like they're sort of making different food decisions, and also they're building a large garden there, which is really cool. We also just talked about focusing on a certain sort of overarching set of guidelines, which I found really helpful, and that's social, emotional health, nutritional health, community to the service, or service to the community, and emerging needs. So we're sort of looking at how, now that we've accomplished this wellness policy, how we want to move forward with implementing it, but also expanding beyond that. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Anthony?
Good evening. I just want to report, well, first of all, thank you for the flexibility for video conferencing in. And I want to report on the committee, diversity committee for October 3rd. Actually, I have a written report that I would like attached to the minutes, if that's okay. Please let me know. That's my question for Anthony.
That's fine.
But my report out basically is the equity teams, it was a report out to the committee itself. The equity teams have been established in each of the schools. The teams include school staff. The equity report card, some work has been completed over the summer by Liza Lucky, who was an intern at the front office. School district has enlisted her further work by contract. Between September and October, there'll be continued data collection and analysis. Between November and December, there'll be development of assessment recommendations. January, some implementation and wrap up, and a final written doc report summarizing key findings and final recommendations on the report February 1st, 2019. Hispanic Heritage Celebration. The district needs more time to fully revamp this cultural celebration. On community presentations at our last diversity committee in May, there was a discussion on seeking out input from the individual schools for topics that we were calling community presentations. Community presentations that our schools can help parents prioritize their child's education as well as receive information and inspiration to help their child succeed in school. Emails were sent out to the PTO contacts to enlist their help. Some questions have been received on that project. Also, revisions to the code of conduct. We talked about that. Comments have been received by the NYCLU last year. The district's in the process of forming teams to revise the code of conduct. So the discussion was about the surveying for the community presentations that may be duplicative of a community engagement project planned for early November and early January. The focus of the community presentation would be what parents can do. Scope and resources for the community presentations are not resolved. There was a suggestion to simply proceed with the school to prison pipeline presentation and not conduct a survey. Another point of discussion was with a new school year, what are the goals for the diversity committee? The committee discussed coming up with actionable items. The committee also discussed having an oversight role. Another item that was discussed was a request was made to translating our messaging to Spanish. And also we discussed does the public know the work done by the diversity committee? So there are some follow-up items. The district will look into the effort of translating the messages to Spanish. Also, we will table the community presentation project for now. And at our next meeting, we'll discuss diversity committee presentations and forming an actionable list. The next meeting is scheduled for November 8th, 8:15 p.m. And if another committee member wants to add on to that report, please feel free.
Thank you. Mike?
Okay, sure. So I was really happy to hear about homecoming and that people were very excited about the field and the lights. Really excited about, you know, proceeding on or progressing with the project, the turf field. So it's really exciting that it's really going to help to obviously enhance the school and the community, really help to tie us all together. So that's really great. We do have a facilities meeting tomorrow, right, 7 p.m. at the district office. Also, there's an audit committee meeting. I was looking on October 22nd, so the Monday before the next board meeting. The other thing is I went on the facility tours today. We went to visit Sargent first and then South Avenue. It was really great to see that the buildings and the interiors were kept in very good condition. They were clean and set up well. The smart boards were all in place, and many of them were actually in the little the sitting area, like where their gathering areas were. So they're clearly being used. Some were at different heights, so it was really clear that these were being used a lot. That was good. There's obviously some things that need to continue to be maintained. We did see the solar shades at Sargent in the upstairs, so that was good. They said they worked pretty well. At a certain temperature, some of the hot temperatures we've had, they weren't. No school was good, but in general, they worked pretty well. So that's really it for my report.
Great, thank you. Melissa?
I just want to also reiterate that homecoming was awesome. I think the word that I've used a few times is electrifying. It was really great to walk onto that field. I had a great feeling of nostalgia to my high school days when I used to drive my car around the track. I had a car that was the same color as our school colors, and my sister was the school mascot. So we would parade around the field, and it was awesome. And I wanted to give kudos to Principal Soto. I know that in the community there was a lot of thanking of Mr. Giametta, and with all due credit to Mr. Giametta, I think that Ms. Soto probably deserves a lot of the credit for the homecoming, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. I attended the policy committee. Was it last week?
September 26th.
Wow. Okay, so 2 weeks ago already. And I know James will speak to that, and maybe after you give your report, I have just an additional comment, but I'll let you talk about that first. And also, Flora, you mentioned the Farm to School program at Rombout. I have it on good authority that the kids are talking about that and they're excited about it. So, awesome. That's all I have.
Great.
Thanks.
James?
Yep. So we had a policy committee 2 weeks ago on September 26th. We had a decent turnout. I think we've had around 10 or 11 people from the public came to sit in. Mostly weighing in or entirely weighing in on our review of the homeschool student participation extracurricular activity policies, which we reviewed and we discussed. On that, we made a decision to table that for our next policy meeting. In the meantime, we are trying to assess the impact. Matt is going to, you're going to look at the numbers of extracurricular programs and enrollment that currently we currently have in our district, and try and have some kind of assessment of what kind of impacts might come from that. Anthony Singh made a database of all of the schools in New York State that offer, that allow extracurricular access for their homeschool students. I've written the 8 schools that are around our same population by district, and I wrote the boards and the superintendents. I've heard back from 4 so far, really just to ask them more anecdotally what were some of the challenges they had to implementing that, and what has been the impact, if any, for having participation from their homeschool students. So I look forward to continuing that in our next meeting. We also reviewed 2 other policies that are both being pushed to a first read, which we have, a notice of meetings and public complaint policy. And then we also have our policy 0110, sexual harassment policy, which we moved to bring to a second read. We're looking at tonight, or to a final read tonight. We're waiving first and second read, and that's to meet a compliance, date compliance. We need to have it in by tonight, I believe. That's all.
Great. All right.
I also went to homecoming, my first homecoming ever too, and it was great. The weather was unusually beautiful compared to what we've had, and the spirit was really high. It was really a great evening. I didn't make it to the early events, but it was really wonderful. I also wanted to mention I forgot to mention last time, but at the Rombat Middle School open house, they had tastings, and the food was delicious, and they were giving out recipes, and they are really pushing it, and it seems great. I can only imagine it will be a great thing for the students there. And the staff was really proud of what they were doing. They really were invested in it, which was great. I also just wanted to congratulate, I read in the Highlands Current that Kira Husbands, a recent Beacon High School graduate, was just honored at the annual Dutchess County Executive Arts Awards dinner, which is exciting. And lastly, I attended the Dutchess County School Board Association meeting last week. We mostly discussed the new partnership that they want to do with the Lower Hudson Education Coalition. And this is something I'm a little bit unclear how we're supposed to go about it. I guess we don't need to vote as a board, and I'm not sure if I should bring it up more under new business, but I think they are looking a little bit for consensus from the board. It's really trying to amplify our voice, as gather the Lower Hudson districts so that we have a louder voice. Those districts are Putnam, Westchester, Dutchess, and Rockland counties, and this is an organization that's been around for a while, but I think maybe we were not involved for a little while, and we're renewing our involvement. And what they're doing really to amplify their voice is they basically have hired lobbyists. They've hired an organization called Ostroff Associates, and they're watching what's going on in Albany. They're there all the time. They're claiming that they have very good relationships with government officials there, in a very legal way, obviously. But and I don't know how that would change if the administration changes. But it seems like a good idea. It seems like they're sort of able to get ahead of things before they're actually bills that are written, maybe, or really be a little bit more involved with the process rather than just reacting to what we're receiving. I'm not totally sure about, there's no real mission. They're sort of taking issues as they come. They took a very nuanced stance on the APPR they wrote a memo of concern about that rather than just outright rejecting it. I didn't read the memo of concern. This all happened before I was representing Beacon there, but I want to look a little bit more at what they're doing. I think the idea is good and very powerful. Could be very powerful. The way it's organized is that there's a steering committee, and I think Dutchess only has one member, whereas Westchester and Putnam have like 4 each. So we're sort of underrepresented on the steering committee, but Kelly Lapham is the chair of the steering committee, so at least our one voice is a louder voice there. So the question really is, do we want to continue with this? And I don't know, Anthony, is that something that we should bring up as new business in the next meeting to discuss? I mean, we don't need a board vote on it per se, so.
But we want consensus to see.
But I think we do want consensus.
Yeah.
So we'll put it on the agenda for next meeting to talk a little bit more about it. The dues are, I think it's $882 a year. That's all.
All right. I have no comments. All right, the consent agenda. Oh, before we get to the consent agenda, we do have 2 addendums to the agenda. They're both under non-instructional personnel lists. F is an approved salary and benefit package for the secretary to the superintendent of schools. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the attached benefits package for the secretary to the superintendent of schools. Be it resolved that the salary for Victoria Jackson, secretary to the superintendent of schools, shall be $60,000 prorated effective October 22nd, 2018. That's F. The second addendum is to accept the resignation of Thorell Doulis as a bus driver effective 10/8/18. All right. So the consent agenda, the use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and the item will be considered and voted on separately, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issue. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. My papers got out of whack here. Hold on. 10.02 through 10.12.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
James, comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 8-0. I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Anthony? I did. I included it in non-instructional as F and then G. I'm sorry. Anthony, you were second?
Yeah.
Comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 8-0. Thank you, Anthony.
And